Welcome, good morning to everyone. This is a hybrid event. My name is Thitinan Pongsotirak. I'm the director of ISIS Thailand. It's been over a year since we've had an event in person. So let us start. Today's public forum is about Thai politics. An overview with specifics about when the election will take place for Bangkok governorship, for the national elections, about who will be contesting and what the prospects might be. Before we start, I think I'll invite the Dean of the Faculty of Political Science, Ajahn Ek Tangsap Pathana. The Dean he supervises ISIS Thailand, so he'll provide opening remarks and then we'll go from there. Ajahn Ek, chen kap.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and warm hello and sawadee krap to everyone. Welcome to our public forum today on Thai politics, update, polls, prayers and prospects. We on the organizing team are excited this morning to be able to hold this public forum in person. It had been over a year since we had an in-person event. So despite everything, we are happy to be back on campus and to host all of you here today. Our public forum this morning is on overview in a way. We want to look at what's been happening in Thai politics while we were away working from home under the pandemic. As we know, while the coalition government of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has shown signs of divisions and instability, it has managed to soon reach its fourth and last year in office, based on the last general election in March 2019. And as the current four-year term of the House of Representatives will be completed just over a year from now, there is much debate and discussion about when the next nationwide poll will take place. Which political party will be contesting under what terms and who the major player will be, including candidates for the premiership. In addition, the Bangkok gubernatorial poll is also at stake, expected to take place this year, possibly as clearly as May. When it comes to electoral politics, Bangkok is no Thailand, but the capital's gubernatorial outcome may be indicative of poll results elsewhere. Amidst polls and personalities, this morning, we will also assess the trend and direction of the youth-led protest movement that made much political splash in 2020 and 2021. Has the student-led political movement lost ground, or does it still have traction and ability to make its voice heard once again in future? How will these youth vote in the upcoming election? There are some of the questions and issues the expert and experienced lineup of speakers will address at this public forum. And now I would like to thank our speaker, Mr. Bun Kua Nun Pao Thong, the student activist, President, Student Council of Mahidol University, Mr. Prin Panichapak, the Deputy Leader and Head of Economics Team of Democrat Party, and advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Commerce, Ms. Panika Wanit, Executive Committee of Progressive Movement and former Member of Parliament, and คุณจตุรนต์ฉายแสง former Deputy Prime Minister and the former Education and Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Justice. And now, thanks so much for all of them for sharing your time, experience, and expertise. There are too many unanswered questions in Thai politics, and here this morning we will try to tease out a few of the answers. Thank you very much, and I hope you will enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, ขอบคุณครับอาจารย์เอก I also want to welcome our online audience participants at home and offices around Thailand and in the region. So good morning to our online guests. Now let me invite speakers for today to take your seat on the stage. คุณบุญเกื้อหนุน and คุณปรินพานิชภัก คุณพันนิกาวานิช and then คุณจาตุรนต์ฉายแสง Please join me on the stage, and then we will go from there. So today, warm welcome again. It's exciting for us to have this event here in the oldest building on campus. Before COVID, and even during COVID, I think the last time we had an in-person event was over a year ago. So it's really nice to have a hybrid in-person, face-to-face, in the flesh. And today, panel here, I think we can talk a lot about Thai politics. I would just set the scene by saying that there are a lot of questions, unanswered questions that I think Jan Ek has just mentioned. People wonder what will happen in Thailand. COVID is dissipating, subsiding a little bit. Restrictions have eased somewhat, easy enough for us to have this event here in person. Infection numbers still high, but the fatalities are much lower. So I think it's going in the right direction. The last time we did this was in, I think, 2020, maybe early 21, the last time, over a year ago. And during the COVID period, I think we had a number of webinars, online events, but in person it's been too few. 2 years ago, let's start with Bun Gur Nun. His nickname is Francis. So you'll see the biographies. We have the biographies, the biodata of the speakers. We've handed them out. About 2 years ago, at this time, the youth-led protest movement began on campuses, different campuses, and almost spontaneously in reaction to the dissolution of the Future Forward Party. Kun Panika will talk a little bit later as a former MP from that party that was dissolved in February 2020. After the dissolution of Future Forward, protests mushroomed around campuses and really built, and it really kind of peaked later in the year, about August, September 2020. So Bun Gur Nun, Francis was among the student activists, leaders. He has just been elected by his peers to be the president of the Student Council of Mahidol University just last weekend. And remarkably, Francis, he prefers to be called Francis. He is self-taught. You'll see his linguistic skills, and he is very articulate. I've had to ask him to keep his remarks to within 15 minutes. Otherwise, he'll just very fiery. He can go on for a long time. So, Francis, maybe tell us a little bit about what's happened to the youth-led protest movement that was so vocal, vibrant in 2020. It generated a lot of optimism, excitement, and then kind of peak and fizzled. Are those issues and grievances that you and your colleagues protested about, have they gone away? Will the student protest movement come back again? Why not? And how do you see, your role, the role of the young men and women in Thai politics, even though the movement has been weakened, but is there still a role moving forward, especially as younger people come of voting age? Francis, maybe just give us a 15-minute opening, please.
First of all, good morning, Your Excellencies and honorable guests. As you can see, well, this is the second time that we are here together with Chantitan, of course. Anyhow, so in answer to the questions of what happened to the youth movement as of late, I think we need to understand that, well, they have been going at these demonstrations and protests at a very great length of time with a great length of energy. But as we all know, that doing something so extremely for so long, it's going to be unsustainable. And to that end, the youth movement that has happened from 2020 has now since, well, I'm not going to be using the word fizzle out or anything like that. It's more like a recuperation period. Because remember, we all, despite all the protests and demonstrations, we are all still students. We are still in the university, and we need to tend to that day job, as much as we hated to think about that too, but it is the reality of the game. And of course, a lot of people who has been involved in the youth movement in 2020 has been since doing their own things right now, and including myself actually, because as you all know, I have been slapped by the Thai authorities with the charges that were extreme, to say the least. And even that, I have to give myself a pause and try to think about what could I be doing next. And the students, my friends from the movement, has long since taken the same position. But we also need to remember that there are still those who are in jail, including Parichivarak or Penguin, the main protest leaders of the movement in 2020, who are still now being detained for pre-trial detention with no end in sight. And as for the others who a little bit more lucky, they got out, but they were put under house arrest, which is also impeding with the leadership positions, of course. And long since, the students have already taken an interest elsewhere, of course. What was the other question again? I'm sorry.
Are you, the movement, still a force to be reckoned with going forward? And maybe a little bit about your charge, the 110 sedition charge. What's the status there?
Well, given that they are now looking into other places, it could be said that we are now looking to become a silent majority, to say the least. We want to affect change, but we want to affect that change in our own way, in our own methods, the way of doing, in our own time. And that includes me as well, because in the end, when the charge of Section 110 of the crime against the Queen's liberty came in, it was extreme. It was too extreme of a charge, and like I said, that put me into some kind of a consideration for what I'm going to do next afterwards. And in the end, I came up with a determination that if you want to start a democracy, if you want to build on a democracy that can be outlast, sustainable, and eternal, to say the least, we must start from something small. And that something small is where I am studying right now in Mahidol University, and that's where I intend to do my part to build that democracy as president of the Student Council. And of course, there's also still about that charge of Section 110, which is still ongoing in the court proceedings. And after I have met, after I've been requested to appear at the criminal court, Now it has been the date has been set for a series of investigations by the court, inquisitive process to which to determine whether I am actually guilty of that charge or not. But that will not happen until November 2022, and it could go on until next year. So that's my overall situation right now.
You mentioned SLAP. Can you tell us a little bit more about SLAP?
Yes, well, SLAP, or SLAPP, is, well, probably it is kind of a term that would be used in the United States, but it would probably applicable to this situation as well. It is more like strategic lawsuit against public participation, and a hefty one that was put by the Thai authorities. And this lawsuit, discharge of Section 110, was nothing more than a deliberate attempt to silence myself, as well as the other, with some other charges like lèse-majesté, sedition charges, violations of the Emergency Situation Act, and among other things too. So what happens right now is a series of these strategic lawsuits that was designed to put an attempt to stifle dissent like myself and the others.
So maybe it's having an effect. You think it's effective, this SLAP?
You could say that it is effective because after a while, the protest leaders as of late will have to decide to stay silent it was by circumstances and not by choice. And like I said, because of that situation that we have been through right now, we tend to think of more possible ways to do our part without actually having to be actively on the speaking terms of it. Yeah.
Okay, this is the last question for you, and thank you for keeping to time, Francis. A lot of people wonder, because 2 years ago, we all saw student-led protests on campuses, and for the 2020, almost the whole year, it seemed like change was in the air. It was very dynamic and a lot of rumblings, voices being heard. So a lot of people wonder what's happened to them. I mean, where are they? These your colleagues, your friends, no more. And so I think people have been asking, like, what's happened? Where are you guys? And then second, have they lost hope? Have they, since they've been slapped with SLAP, and since they have been intimidated, harassed, and so on, are they still? Do they still have some fight left in them? Are they coming back, or are they kind of taking a rest or maybe losing hope?
Well, I cannot speak for others, obviously. I mean, I would imagine that Penguin, who is still in pre-trial detention right now, would still have hope despite everything that happened to him. And as for me, I do still have hope, obviously, and that is why I intend to do my part, like I said, in a student council as much as I can. And as for the others, I would believe that, so I think there is an expression, down but never out. So of course, they are now away right now, and there's no denying that. But I think it is kind of like trying to recuperate and trying to look into the sense of what can be done next. And when the time comes, and it will come, that's the time we'll have to come up again. But of course, like I said, we cannot change the situation that has been here for 100 years in a mere 3 or 4 years. You gotta keep in time. Change is, quite frankly, hard, especially for this country, but you have to keep up with the hope. You have to believe, even though you might see that a lot of people might incline to leave the country, a lot of them, but I'm still part of the group of people who still have to keep that hope for a better country.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to you with more questions, Francis, about younger people, maybe of voting age, and then will they come to the ballot box, or maybe they'll stay home. We'll come to more questions for you. Let me turn to our next speaker, Khun Jaturon Chaisang. He has an illustrious political career since 1986. He was elected MP 5 times, I think, and party list MP twice in 2001, 2005. He's a former education minister, justice minister, deputy prime minister, and still with the leadership of the Pheu Thai party. He also was a student activist in his time in the 1970s, and in an earlier generation calling for change based in Chiang Mai University at that time. So Kun Jadron, and now we turned more directly into Thai politics. There's a lot of commotion, right? There have been the constitutional reforms, a little bit amendments. The Palang Pracharat, the ruling Palang Pracharat party, has splintered, fragmented, and a lot of drama, forming other, defected, forming other parties, led by Kun Thamanat, for example. And then on the Pheu Thai side, also, some movements there. And a lot of people think about, calling for election, right? In addition, there's also the Bangkok election. So I think people are talking more and more like when the election will take place. So I think maybe we'll just first look at the timing of the election. Will there be a Bangkok governor election? The last time we had it was almost some years ago, almost a decade ago, 8 years. And it was supposed to be a 4-year term. So this current governor that we have is not elected. He was appointed by the military junta based on Article 44. It was actually a decree. And so it's up to the cabinet, right, Kun Chaton, when the Bangkok governorship, the election will take place. So maybe just tell us a little bit about when you think actually that we will see an election for Bangkok governor. And then how do you see the timing of the national election? Of course, there has to be election by next year. It's a 4-year term is completed in March. So the clock is running out anyway. But a lot of people think that there'll be elections sooner. Do you think there'll be elections sooner in the national politics?
Thanks for having me here. And, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Some analysts or some politicians will anticipate that the election will, the House dissolution will take place in November last year. Last year. Some thought that the House will be dissolved in February, and later a lot of people think that Prime Minister Prayut might not be able to stay in power longer than April, because in May there will be a central debate, no confidence motion. And once there is a central debate, Prime Minister will has no power or right to dissolve the House. He has to face with the debate, and then there will be a voting in the Parliament. Given the conflict in the government, probably Prime Minister might not want to risk being ousted in the Parliament. That's some kind of theory or analysis so far. But the situation has changed very rapidly. Let me explain a little bit why there's an issue of instability, why there is a question of when there will be an election. Will there be an election sooner than scheduled, sooner than the regular term? This instability issue comes from two major reasons. One is the dissatisfaction of people toward the mismanagement or mishandling of the economy, poor performance of the government in handling the economy. and the other one is the conflict in the government, especially between the three ex-commander-in-chief in the cabinet, and the conflict between the prime minister and the core governmental party. So two major reasons. The first reason, the dissatisfaction of the mishandling of the economic condition. Thailand had in a period of 5 years before the COVID pandemic, Thailand economy had the slowest growth rate in ASEAN, and it has the widest wealth inequality probably in the world. It's in the top 5 worst wealth inequality in the world. And once the pandemic started, Thailand can deal with the COVID-19 pandemic pretty well, or very well, in terms of if you look at the infected cases, number of deaths, but at the cost of the economic recession, drastic economic recession. Because the main mistake is the lack of balance between containing the pandemic and maintaining economic activities. So, and after the second round, there was mismanagement with vaccination, production, procurement, and distribution. So Thailand missed the boat of the global economic recovery when many other countries had been in the process of economic recovery. Thailand was still messed up with vaccination. So the economy has been even worse. The inequality problem is even worse, of course, because all over the world, the effect of the pandemic on inequality is very obvious, and not excluded Thailand, and probably Thailand is even worse than the average. So this really bad economic situation stems from the wrong policy, the wrong direction in tackling the problems of the country. It leads to dissatisfaction of the government. A lot of people ask if you go to if you talk with people, laymen, they'll ask how long will this prime minister stay in power? When will he leave? Well, when will there be an election? Will there be an election soon? That's one major reason. The other one is the conflict in the government. You see what happened during the last central debate a few months ago. There was an attempt to oust the prime minister. It was stopped by a lot of management, a lot of power being deployed. That we can see and some kind of a clue or evidence of conflict in the government. But after the 2 by-elections, maybe 3 by-elections, a split in the Palang Pracharat party, some 20 or 18 MPs left the party, joined another party by some accomplice with the party leader, right? They asked the party to what do you call? Force them to leave the party, but actually they voluntarily leave the party to join another party, to be independent, legally independent of the major party, so that they can even be opposition party. They can vote against the prime minister in the next central debate. That's the signal they want to tell the public and tell the prime minister. That's obviously major conflict in the government and in the core party of the coalition. But all in a sudden, just probably less than 2 weeks, the leader of a medium-sized party, Phum Chai Thai, which is actually just a medium-sized party, proclaimed that he can manage to have some 260 MPs with him to support the government. I'm not sure if he spelled it that he was going to, these 260 people are going to support prime minister or support anyone who wants to form a government. So you see that we can see that the people in the government realigned very quickly. We don't know this small, medium-sized party and 260 MP will support whom to be prime minister, but they are going to support people in the same side, for sure. That means the attempt to continue being in power of the conservative side is still there, and so there is we do not. It is not clear when there will be a dissolution of the House or when there will be an election. Maybe if they can negotiate, I mean the 3 ex-commander-in-chief of the army and the party, the relevant parties can negotiate for some common interest. Prime Minister might want to face, might dare to face the central debate and survive, and then stay in power as long as they want. And that's one possibility. But if the situation, the economic situation becomes worse and worse, people don't tolerate, and the popularity of the prime minister declined further, then the coalition parties might change their mind and might want to be in different position, might want to either change prime minister or might want to withdraw from the coalition. That can also take place. So the challenge of Thai people, or the country, is whether Thai electorates, Thai people can change the government via the upcoming general election, like what has happened in many other countries. In some countries, people support the leader who is competent, who can solve the problem well. Then people support via the election, and then the leader of that country remains in power with even more support than before. On the other hand, some other countries, the leader of the country who failed to solve the problem or who was corrupt in the process of dealing with the COVID pandemic was ousted via the general election. That kind of things happen in democratic countries. We don't know if this kind of process will take place in Thailand, because our system, the constitution, is designed in favor of those who were in power after the coup, or the coup makers. But it's a huge challenge for Thai public, Thai people, and it's the duty of political parties, politicians, activists, the media, to convince people, to inform people enough so that the people understand that the real cause of the problem, of the economic problem, is the poor performance, is the wrong policy, wrong direction of this government. And if you want to be in a better condition, you need to change the government. Get a new form of a government, a pro-democracy government, more competent government. And then it will be a springboard to the amendment of the Constitution, which is the fundamental problem of this country. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khun Chatron. I'm just going to follow up on what you said, just for our audience members to get a clearer picture. So the scenarios are, if you're looking at change of government from General Prayut to someone else, it can only happen with general elections, one way. Next year, full term. Short of that, as you mentioned, if there's a censure debate, and what Phumchai Thai Party has mentioned, has suggested, so one way of changing the government is to keep the premiership within the ruling coalition. Would that be one scenario? So could have another alternative prime minister, not General Prayut, but still the same coalition parties. Would that be the one scenario?
You mean before the upcoming election?
Before the
next election?
Yeah. So within this...
Before the election, it's unlikely that there will be a change of the prime minister. General Prayut will not step down.
Okay.
And he wouldn't want to face with the censure debate without some kind of guarantee from his colleague, his close ally, who might be in a conflict now, like General Pravit. So he has to make sure that he will get the support in the censure debate. Otherwise, he will have to dissolve the House. But I cannot imagine the scenario that General Prayut resigned and then tell the coalition parties or tell General Pravit and Anupong to find a substitute, because according to Constitution, you must be a candidate. You must have been a candidate in the last election, right? In order to become prime minister.
Right.
So there's only a few people left. Some is already running for Bangkok governor. Some is already left the party that she or he was with. It's very few.
Yeah. So it looks then that in the central debate in May, if General Prayut cannot be assured of winning the vote, then he could dissolve the House, right? But more likely, there will be some kind of maneuver so that he will then get enough votes to survive, which then would then draw out the government to the full term.
That seems to be what they've been trying in the past week.
Yeah. Do you think Bangkok governorship election will take place in May?
I guess, I think.
No one really knows.
But it doesn't make much difference. We've wait for altogether 12 years, I think. Maybe 10 years, or 10 or 11 years after the last election. And this is very something that still is a bit puzzle to me as a person who when I was a student, we experienced the situation where Bangkok people were calling for an election of the governor of Bangkok.
Yeah.
But now after 10 years, nobody has been interested much in demanding that there must be an election as soon as possible. So, but it seems that they want to hold an election maybe in May, and when there is an election in May, there should be a general election in April, right? So there's some connection.
Okay, so Bangkok governor election is crucial. It's not everything, but it might be kind of an early sign of the general elections, how parties do. Let me turn to Kun Panika. Welcome back to campus. She's a graduate. Kun Panika Wani is a graduate from our Faculty of Political Science in 2010, and then she went on to do a postgrad degree at the London School of Economics in global politics, and then worked as a journalist for, I think, 6 years, and then also at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for a stint. And she's been, since 2018, a spokesperson at that time for the Future Forward Party. They did very well in the election in March 2019, coming in as the third largest winning party with 82 MPs. And then subsequently, of course, as we all know, the Future Forward Party was dissolved in February 2020. And the dissolution led to the new successor party, called the Move Forward Party, that we have now. Fewer numbers, I think what's the number of MPs? 50? About 50. So, Kun Panika, of what you're seeing, and now your role is, since you've been banned, right? So, let's not forget that there's a lot of politicians, elected politicians, have been banned. Kun Chaturan, I think you were banned earlier too, but for 5 years. But yours 10 years.
10 years.
10 years, okay. This is a phenomenon not to overlook. Elected politicians, elected representatives banned for 10 years, which is a long time. Now, in your view now, and now you, not just with the party, but with the a movement to really kind of reform Thailand, a progressive movement. So you have a different view of it now, not just inside the party, but a little bit outside. In the upcoming elections, Bangkok and the general elections, the results that we saw in 2019, Pheu Thai won the election, right? Largest winning, 138, Palang Pracharat 116, Future Forward 82. So that kind of pattern, do you think that we will see that pattern again, or would it shift more towards the coalition parties, or would it shift more towards the opposition parties?
First of all, I have to apologize to all of your excellencies that I have to leave in 20 minutes time, I think, because I have an appointment at the criminal court. Part of my political career is at court. So I'll try to make the most of the time I have left. And let me be clear about me and other executive committee of the progressive movement being banned from politics. To be exact, we are banned from having a political position. For example, ministers or MPs or any, we don't have any right to run for political posts, for an election. But no one can ban a Thai citizen from participating in politics. So what we have done, it's been 2 years, exactly 2 years, because the party was dissolved on the 22nd of February 2 years ago. 21st of February 2 years ago, so it's exactly 2 years. And after 2 years, we have proven that they did something gravely wrong in banning us from politics, because we have become a kind of election machine. We are a group of people who got through 3 national local elections in the past 2 years, because it's been very special time in Thailand that we had 3 local elections happen consecutively in the past 2 years. We have Oboj election, the provincial election, and we have the Thesaban election, and we have just finished the Oboj elections a few months ago. So the progressive movement decided to send our candidates in all local elections in a national campaign. And it happened for the first time in Thailand that someone decided to send candidates as a group, as one name, as progressive movement, and they can do a campaign, a single campaign nationally in local elections. And that happened 3 times. So in the past 2 years, we have learned a lot about elections, especially in rural areas in Thailand. And it's kind of an intensive course for us, because it's 3 elections in 2 years, right? And it's not by election, which happened in one electoral district, but this happened nationally. So what we learned, and especially what we discussed with our friends, Move Forward Party, who sit in the parliament, it's very unlikely that Kun Prayut will have a happy ending or happy beginning again in the next election. Why? Because Ajahn asked Kun Jadrun just a few minutes ago about the possibility of having Bangkok Governor and Pattaya local election in May, before or after general election. It is very unlikely that the government side, be it Palang Pracharat or other parties derived from Palang Pracharat, will win in the elections. And everyone knows that, right? It's very unlikely that they will win in Bangkok. And why is important? Bangkok have 30 constituency MPs, and now it's going to be 33. According to the new organic law, it's going to be 33 MPs in one province, the biggest chunk in Thailand constituency MP list. Who gain Bangkok governor? That group, that party, that faction will gain 33, possibly 33 MPs in Bangkok, which equal a medium-sized party, right? So it's very likely that Kun Chachat or any candidate from Democratic camp will win in the Bangkok governor election. If they let the Bangkok governor election happen before the general election, it's the end of the story for Palang Pracharat to have a chance to win in Bangkok in the general election. So they really don't want it to happen that way. Or if they have the general election happen before the Bangkok governor election, that is more likely. But the result of the election will not be as good as last time too, because the popularity for the government right now is not sweet at all, right? But at least it's better than having only Bangkok election, because Bangkok is a concentration of people like Kun Francis, right? But in provinces, you have variation of political opinions and variation of political preferences for all parties. So it might be better to balance this sentiment rather than having Bangkok sentiment influence across the country before the general election. So for me, I think the general election might happen first, then the Bangkok governor election. And another reason, they cannot survive the censure debate, which is going to happen in May, for sure. Even with the support for Phum Chai Thai party. And Phum Chai Thai party, to be honest, who knows, they can change their mind anytime. Just a few days ago, Kun Supachai Posu, the Vice Speaker of the Parliament, told the media that if the government doesn't support the marijuana law, they will withdraw from the government coalition. So what does that mean? They can withdraw anytime they see benefits in it, right? So, and they're not wrong. This is the nature of being in a coalition government, right? That this is why you are in a coalition government, to negotiate. So under this circumstance, I think there is no good scenario for Kun Prayut. They can decide to dissolve the parliament and have the general election first and then Bangkok governor election. That will mean to clear the game and start the negotiation once again after the general election. But to have the general election in May, Kun Prayut have a very big problem too. That is the organic law. The constitution has been changed already by their own intention to have a two-ballot system and a calculation system which is very complicated, but is to clarify it, it's the formula of 100 party list MP per 400 constituency MP, whichever major party or parties which can have more constituency MPs, and it's not in favor of medium and small party which have more party list MPs. In that scenario, in their mind, that time the major parties will be Pheu Thai and Palang Pracharat. Fine, I can let Pheu Thai have some benefits from this, but Palang Pracharat will gain more benefits from this system and this formula, which was designed for their party. But after a year, Palang Pracharat has been broken to a smaller faction. Maybe they will have 2, 3, 4 parties, and no longer Palang Pracharat, or Palang Pracharat will be just a small or medium party. So the only party which will gain benefit from this two-ballot system and this formula will be Pheu Thai. So I'm very glad it happened that way. But Kun Prayut is not glad at all. It happened that way. So according to many people inside the Parliament House, Kun Prayut is trying to get away with this by reversing everything back to the same constitution. For me personally, I cannot imagine how it could happen. Because the constitution has been amended already, and the organic law is going to go through the government this Thursday. So everything is done. I don't know how they will alter it back to the one ballot and the same formula period as in last election. But that's what Kun Prayut is trying to do. And let's see he can do that or not. If he can do that, Palang Pracharat might gain some benefits from the election, as well as some other medium parties. For example, Phum Chai Thai Democrat Party, Move Forward Party, they will be fine with that system. And then after the election, the big negotiation will happen again, and no one really knows who is going to be able to form the government. But for me personally, I don't think there will be a shift of the camp soon next election, because the constitution still favor Prayut's side, and everyone knows that the highest institution in Thailand still endorse Kun Prayut and not Kun Pravit, and that's why Kun Thamanat's party cannot change anything. They just do it for the sake of negotiating for a seat in the cabinet, but not a change of the prime minister, because Kun Pravit, the head of that camp, has not been endorsed and can never be endorsed by the highest institution in Thailand. So it cannot be happen. So it will be Kun Prayut, who is still believed to be the best prime minister for the high institution.
Okay, you mentioned the word endorsement. That's very consequential, I think, and indicative of political trends and patterns. Before you go, Kun Panika, just a couple of questions. I mean, so the two ballot system now, the constitutional amendment, is actually ironic because it was designed to benefit the ruling party, right, the big party, Palang Pracharat, but now the party has been splintered, fragmented into other smaller parties, so they actually will not benefit from the two ballot. So the 100 party list, this is a provision we had in the 1997 Constitution originally, and then the 400 constituency MPs. So it looks like the Pheu Thai stands to benefit the most as a large party. But my question to you is about the progressive movement, Move Forward Party. You know, the Future Forward Party, the predecessor of the Move Forward, is really a young party, right? Set up in 2018. So for, you know, Thailand for a long time has had a difficult time, apart from the Democrat Party. Parties come and go. And this party in a short time has really institutionalized, right? But it was dissolved. Can you tell us a little bit about what is it like when a party like this, you know, that came in third, 82 MPs, dissolve just like that, and then the Move Forward Party succeeds it? Is it very difficult to form a new party and then strengthen it, institutionalizing it? And then what happens if the Move Forward Party is dissolved? What's the chance of that?
It might sound weird, but to dissolve the party actually strengthen and institutionalize the party. Why? During the beginning period of founding Future Forward Party, we have to accept that we were not satisfied at all, that the party depended very much on the leadership of the party. Kun Thanathorn, Ajahn Piyabut, and I myself were the faces, the main actors of the party. But with a very short period of time, we have 6 months before election date, since the beginning of the party, 6 months to enter the election date. So there was no choice at that time because we had strong characters like Kun Thanathorn and Ajahn Piyabut. So we utilized our mascots. But that was not very healthy to build up the party, to institutionalize the party. But when they decided to dissolve the party and ban us from politics, it forced us to open way to other members of the party, other MPs, and they are very capable, they are very talented, but no one paid enough attention to them because they focused only on the leadership of the party. And at that time, Future Forward Party equaled the leadership of the party. For Move Forward Party, no one can say that. Move Forward Party doesn't equal the leadership of Move Forward Party at all. The Move Forward Party is a better party than Future Forward Party because the Move Forward Party have many rooms, many space for MPs in the party to show their capabilities. And that's what I'm proud. And if the party was not dissolved 2 years ago, it will never happen. And media and even you, the diplomats, will focus on the leadership of the Future Forward Party. So I have to thank the Constitutional Court that they dissolved the party. It paved way to us to institutionalize and build up the party healthily and what should I say? It will be a strong party that lasts. For the Future Forward Party, I'm not so sure that it will be a party that lasts. For the Move Forward Party, I am sure even if the party is dissolved again, we can build up a new party and find the new leadership and new members and new MPs who join us with the same ideologies and the same core values.
So this is a kind of an institutional depth. It's deeper now, the party, thanks partly to the dissolution. You said that you're going to have to go to the criminal court. So let me just ask, you mentioned the Constitutional Court. As a last question before you go, does this have anything to do with the role of the Constitutional Court, Election Commission, National Anti-Corruption Commission? We haven't talked about these institutions, these agencies that have a big role in determining election outcome and government.
We might not realize, but Prayut's regime governed the country for so long and too long. It's been 8 years, right? It's been 8 years. And 8 years are even longer than Kun Thaksin's period of time. Kun Thaksin governed the country for about nearly 6 years. But Kun Prayut governed the country and brought the country to a wrong direction for 8 years. And during the past 8 years, the regime corrupted all main institutions in Thailand. And that's a grave crime he did to the country. He corrupt the justice system, police, military, the bureaucratic system, the local municipality authority system, all institutions, all mechanisms that should serve the people now have been altered to serve the regime. And especially the so-called independent organizations. And I don't know, then even if we have a new government in place next month, I think it might take a year or two at least to fix all this.
Okay, we won't hold you. You have to go, right? Can you stay? Okay, you have to go.
I have to go.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much
The
for your
judge
time.
is waiting for me.
You don't want to go. Thank you
very much.
We'll have to invite you back for a longer session. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, may I just a quick correction from Kun Panika. Well, I'm actually not a Bangkok citizen. I'm from the province of Nakhon Sawan. Anyway, that's the only minor part.
Okay, thank you, Francis. Kun Prin Panichapak is the deputy leader of the Democrat Party, a member of the ruling coalition party. He is also the head of the economic team of the Democrat Party. Kun Prin earned his degree from the London School of Economics, and he worked in finance for a long time and brokerage, eventually heading up the Credit Lyonnais securities in Thailand. And he's had all kinds of roles, including at the National Innovation Agency as an executive director. So he's very much an up-and-coming MP candidate for the next election for sure, and potentially leadership of the Democrat Party in the future. And so Kun Prin, in view of the discussion that we have had so far this morning, we're still looking at when the election will take place. And you know why? Because I think people are so tired of the current leadership. So every small thing that comes up, they say, okay, there must be a new election now, right? But in fact, the Prayut-led coalition government could muddle its way for longer, and maybe even a full term. So Bangkok governorship, you think it will take place before the general election or the other way around? And what's your kind of election outlook from your vantage point?
Thank you, Dr. Titinan, for kindly having invited me on this panel. And interesting, we were having 3 LSE alumni, London School of Economics alumni together. But for me personally, I think on elections, it is most likely the Bangkok governor's election would come before the general election. But of course, there are accidents in politics, and one can never be certain of the 100% chances that would happen. But if you look at the timeline and the statements given by both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Interior, it's pretty clear that they're aiming for a date, whether it's the 22nd or 29th of May, in the month of May. And various parties actually has been voicing that they want this election. In fact, it should have happened last year, and it was postponed, and it was postponed for a few years. Even my boss, the leader of the Democrat Party, Kun Jurin Laksanavisit, has voiced a pretty strong message to the government that he wants to see this election being arranged as soon as possible, because we've been seeing postponements. And I think people, as you say, are ready to go to ballots to choose their governor. And Bangkok is a big city, and one that should have an elected leadership. On the big general election, I think the Prime Minister has also said in public, and also Kun Anutin kind of back up what he was saying, that despite all the turmoil internally within Palang Pracharat, and obviously some disagreement within internally sometimes, that the coalition parties not seeing eye to eye on certain key policies, and all maybe the rhetorics and some of the wordings, it seems to me as a political novice, because as you all know, I've spoken here a couple of times, and as a private sector, and I've spoken with Kun Jatron, kindly come to the CLSA forum when I was in the private sector. So I only joined, and I'm only here because nobody here picked the Democrat Party the last 2 years. So I'm here partly because of the unpopularity of my own political party. But times will change, and there are things that I think the new general election can bring. People always have hope for election, but one thing that I have hope for is the active citizenships that's happening in Thailand, because my generation, or same generation, I'm 44 years old, and I was in private sector for 20 years, and I felt we've been strong critiques of the Thai government of all sides. It could be Democrat Party-led government, it could be Kun Prayut government, it could be the Pheu Thai-led government. The various governments has been under our critiques as a banker, as an analyst. And you saw at our forum that we always make very direct remarks, and we're not shy of making strong remarks on how each governments are handling the economy. For me, we are all in this together, meaning that if you're going to get out of this tough situation, which I'm not going to blame on a single government. For me, it's a series of mistakes that has been carried out because the political system allow us or encourage us to be more short-termism than pushing for long-term structural change for the country that we want to see. Everyone wants change. Everyone wants better change or better future for the country. And definitely I would live long enough to see that change being positive for hopefully myself, my children, my grandchildren. Everyone wants that. But to bring about that change, it's not just about one person's ideology or one political party's ideology. Thailand is made out of, it's quite a big country. It's not a Holland, it's not a Netherlands, where I work for ABN AMRO, the Dutch bank, and 7 million, 8 million people population. Even they admit it's easier to make change in the Netherlands, and being more liberal and being more open and being more innovative. When I was on the board of the National Innovation Agency, we flew to Holland, to Vlakenaken, one of the leading agriculture-based university in Holland. And we asked them, you guys have the best agriculture technologies. And you do this, you do that, you have the best regulation. How do you do all this? And he says, making changes with a country of 6-7 million are easier to implement and push through. And yes, there are some liberal and some uniqueness about the Dutch. My father was studying in Holland at the Rotterdam School of Economics, now Erasmus. So, and then it's just by coincidence that I'm working in ABN AMRO, then I work for Merrill Lynch. And then I went to a few other countries, and there are changes that sometimes easier to make changes. But Thailand is a country of almost 70 million people. It's not an excuse that you're a big country and you can't make change, but I also think that sometimes there are stakeholders within societies that will eventually bring about change with time or with various active citizens. And I'm glad that there are new uprising political talents in Thailand who are fiercely voicing their unhappiness at the Thai society. And I think it gives allow alarm bells to the establishments and to the powers that be and to the politicians that there are factions within society that will not, just sit down, lay low, and listen for nonsense. I'll give you another example. Because of my role as a head economics team advisor to Deputy Prime Minister, focusing on the economic section. Sometimes economics can be a political side, things get involved, and there's one big issue that I'm working on, which is on this the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies. We want to make Thailand a crypto country, a crypto city like Zug in Switzerland. I had some very positive exchanges with the Swiss ambassador and the team there, and as a board of governors of the Stock Exchange of Thailand, I told them to reform and change the way stock exchange thinks. We're not just competing within our own turf as a Stock Exchange of Thailand being the monopoly in Thailand. And monopoly is a big issue in Thailand in many industries, not just finance. And for blockchain and for cryptocurrency, this is a thing that I viewed would actually, it's not just about challenging the establishment or the power that be, but it's about decentralizing and giving the financial power and financial inclusion to the SME and the startups in the fields in Thailand. And it reignites a big debate whether we should collect tax, not collect tax, whether we should fully support this growing community who invest in bitcoins and various cryptocurrencies. Some people think that taking away powers from the Ministry of Finance or taking away power from the Bank of Thailand. But if you can give that power to the startups and the SMEs to have the feeling that they're being included in this growth of the financial sector and be able to access the financial capitals at a difficult time like the COVID-19, I think that would provide them, with more reason or less reasons, hopefully, to go on the streets and hopefully be more inclusive at working with the government. A government that should be truly of all Thai people, of not just, Palang Pracharat or Democrat or Phum Jai Thai. The government should represent the interests. I mean, I saw the other debates on equality, on gender equality, which is a big issue that we've been also pushing for. Issues like this, wouldn't come up at the forefront of the Thai politics had it not been for the efforts of active citizens, both from the NGO, from the politics parties, and even from some traditional parties. There are people who want to support it, but maybe they cannot push this agenda at the forefront of the big institution parties. So it is a positive sign for me with all this divisiveness and with all some people think that it's a fight between the new generation, whether it's a fight between the establishment versus the anti-establishment. The fight, sometimes people say, lasts from various conflicts that has happened between the colors in the past. For me, I see hope. I think that the younger generation wants change, and I want to see change for the better future for the country, not change just for the sake of being nice wordings and being, what's the word you use, polite and keep changing. Sure, there are flaws within the Constitution, and we have debates on this, on the constitutions of, we think that the senators who are 250. I for one have been gone on the public record, and a few people have been on the public record saying that there are ways that the people who has experiences in Thailand can help the country. But one is not to vote for the Prime Minister. And government will not last, the lower house will not last if they don't get the majority support from the lower house. Sure, the upper house has the power to elect the Prime Minister, and that can be used as tools perhaps to push the lower house or pressure the lower house. But for me, it's still the voice of the people who elected the member of parliaments in the lower house that will speak loudest also at the next election, no matter whether that pressure from the 250 seats will be. So I think the country is heading, perhaps interestingly, contradictory to many people who are analyzing, for me, in the right direction, in the direction of ones where people who really care for change are voicing out. Sometimes perhaps some people may disagree with the way they are acting or the way they protest or the way they do some certain things. And I hope that the fire will not die, meaning that the people who want change has to participate in it. Good society don't come cheap. If you want it, you have to participate in it. I certainly am one who felt when I was in private sector, like, we had a few sometimes interesting debates on politics. And if I'm just sitting here and debating and sitting here voicing my anger and voicing my unhappiness at the way the country is being run without coming to participate myself. I'm not a member of parliament yet, but in the next election, perhaps I may stand as a candidate. And if those out there who are unhappy with the way things are being run, there are channels to participate, whether it's local government election, whether it's a national level, whether it's working as a good NGO or participating actively as a good active citizens. And if that passion, if that kind of active citizen, is happening, then for me that's positive for the society. I just hope that there are safe space and there are good rooms for those people to participate in the long run for the country.
Okay, thank you very much, Kumprint, for a positive overview. And I think that a lot of people will share that optimism. Ultimately, we hope that we would go in the right direction. Just a couple of questions. I mean, you heard earlier about Francis' charge. So some of these people who are voicing grievances and hopes for the future, they're being harassed. They're being, locked up and, basic rights are violated. So they have to go to court a lot. So maybe not easy for them. Just what to do about that. And then second, I think you mentioned about crypto, blockchain, and these are great ideas for Thai economy. Do you have receptive ears? I mean, the people listening at all from the Prayut government, how to kind of move the Thai economy forward? I think a major fundamental frustration with the government is that a lot of people feel like the Thai economy is going nowhere, no future. That's why there's no future. That's why the young people are upset. And then just very briefly, in practical steps ahead, you mentioned that Bangkok governorship election probably before, maybe in May, 22nd, 29th, perhaps. How do you see that pan out? The Democrat Party has a very qualified candidate. I think the Move Forward Party also has forwarded someone, and of course Chat is a front runner. How do you see that pan out?
Well, we can be here for another 3 hours for the three big questions, but in short, I do have sympathies. Sympathy in the sense that I want a country to be strong with strong independence organization, and a court needs to be independent and need to sometimes explain their decisions, especially in a world today where institutions that wants to be truly independent would rely their reputation and their independence and their credibility on the way they communicate to society. And I say this with some understanding, because I'll give you an example for my economics part. The Bank of Thailand. In the old days, it's opaque, and it's the way that the Bank of Thailand makes decisions on interest rates, raise or cut, or the way Bank of Thailand regulates the financial sector. They don't need to explain their decisions so much to the public at large. With last governorship of Dr. Virathai Santiprapop, I think he's shifted the decision of central bankers to be ones where it's accountable to the public. They need to explain in details the minutes of why they're doing this or where they're heading for the financial decisions that they're making for the society. And it's impacting various things, and they are impacting their decisions, whether it's on the peer-to-peer lending, on the investment in cryptocurrencies, and perhaps the central bank digital currency, CBDC, that's coming out, the digital baht, and various other transactions that will be important, including perhaps the printing of money, this whole bazooka, the 2 trillion injections, the package that the government did, which part of it is coming from the Bank of Thailand's involvement. So there's various explanations. I think that the independence institution needs to do a better job of communicating. Just because you have the authority and the power that is given in the Constitution, that you can make your decision or your rulings, doesn't mean that you have no responsibility to answer back to the public. For me, it goes with all the independence institution in Thailand that needs to be better, do a better job at this. And this would have various impact, because you know that because we've been in servicing foreigners investing in Thailand, the credibility of a country or credit ratings, it would get impacted if the justice system is not doing justice or is not doing a good job itself. So in the old days, perhaps the justice system or the courts doesn't need to be answerable to anyone, or doesn't need to take time to explain or come out with long statements. I think this day, yes, I still respect the court, and I think various people in Thailand still do respect many courts, but the courts and other independent organizations, I think perhaps some of them will need reform. And we have debated this at various executive courses in Thailand, and that there are efforts actually internally within the court itself. And as you know, court is what do you call it? Plai Nam is a downstream of the justice system. The justice system here needs to be reformed from the upstream, meaning that from the police, from the active citizen itself. And I think various people within the police force actually want this. Not that they're resentment against it or they're against it. They're scared to comment because, of course, their bosses are against reform. But the younger generation within the police forces, the army, within the court, within the attorney generals, they want reform. How do we get the younger, rising, upcoming people within those independent institutions, which should be truly independent, and being able to give fair rulings on both sides? If it's a political case, they should be fair to both sides of the political spectrums. They probably need a reform. So that would be my thought on that one. On Bangkok governor's election race, I think it would be an interesting one because Kun Chad is clearly a leading candidate in the polls, and you've seen all the polls, and he has been campaigning for almost 2 years or more. So it's understandable why he's in the lead, in such a big lead. We don't know yet whether there are more candidates to come, because I know that various other political parties may also field more candidates, and it could make the field even more wider open than what it is at the moment. And Bangkok governor election race is one of the toughest to predict, toughest to forecast, because last election, Kun Sukumpan Boripat, the ex-governor, was due to lose the election by a big margin. In the last week, he won the election. Although he won it by the smallest margin of 200,000 votes, it was still the biggest number of votes that he got. I think 1.2 million something votes that he got. Although Kun Pongsapat also got 1 million vote, which is also the highest vote ever got by a loser in the Bangkok governor election race. So Bangkok governor is very difficult to forecast where that one would go, and perhaps maybe I slightly think that this issue could come down to a personality issue more than a political party issue, because Bangkokians, they are smart people. They want to elect someone who is capable of managing quite a big size of budget, 80 billion baht budget. They want someone who has experience in managing institutions, managing companies successfully, and has an executive mindset, has a progressive mindset, has a vision, has a good vision of what Bangkok could become. So for me, it will be perhaps a choice last minute on an individual politician rather than a political stance. Of course, there will be some political votes. There will be some, the traditional strongholds of various political parties that may still hold. But I think the decisiveness will come from the attractiveness of each candidate's policies and their stance on certain political issues that could decide this. What was the third question again? There was crypto. There are, and actually this is to the credit of some of the powers that be, because I had a good debate with the finance minister, Kun Akom Term Pithiya Phaisit. And I said it in public. I said it to his face. I said it behind his back. I said it to you guys here. So it's not no secret that I have admiration for the man, not because of his. I think he's not claiming to understand blockchain or cryptocurrency, but at least he give us space to voice our unhappiness, voice our disagreement to his face. And I brought the whole lot of the bunch of entrepreneurs, the leaders who are, some of them are digital asset exchange owners from BitCup, Bitasa, Upbit, Zipmex, and Satang Pro. And I brought some of the people who are from the regulator side, who are within the Kolator, SEC, and various of my friends who wants to see a better financial system in Thailand, and also opportunity for companies, startup, SME to raise capital at a cheaper cost. And we brought that some difficult, tough conversation we had with him to his face, and the revenue department for collecting tax and so on and so forth. So we had a 3 hours meeting. Of course, he still thinks differently. He thinks that blockchain, cryptocurrency is not beneficial economically to the people. He doesn't see the benefit side economically as much, and he wants to collect tax, and he claims that tax can be collected I told him, look, you won't collect tax because people will go abroad, people will go and trade in Switzerland, people will go trade in Singapore, go and trade on Binance and various Gate.io and other platforms that are there abroad, and you will lose investment and you will lose good entrepreneurs in Thailand. So we had a healthy debate on that one. And let's see, it could, if I was finance minister, I would do things differently. I would not collect crypto tax, I would support the whole ecosystem, and I would think that we should be giving tax incentive and cut tax for those people. But there are interesting disagreement, and I think he also said the prime minister doesn't understand, so he kind of blamed on his boss in a way.
Yeah, it's very clear that the reason why you're the head of the economic team for the Democrat Party, you have a lot of good ideas. But in terms of, just very quickly, Kumpin, and now I invite questions from the audience after this. We'll go around, and then also our online audience free to write in questions and comments. Looking ahead in the near term, so there'll be a central debate. From the Democrat Party's vantage point, do you think this government will kind of stay more or less intact and kind of muddle its way through the debate and then come out of it more or less the same? Or would it be a big change or a small change?
Got to ask Kun Jaturon, do you have good evidences of the minister's corruption? So, I mean, the censure debates sometimes can be dramatic and wordings are more than the factual base, or sometimes can be mudslinging. But for me, from the Democrat Party point of view, I think within our ministers, I think they're ready to answer anything that the parliamentarians are unhappy about. And as I say, I think it's a crucial tools that anger, unhappiness, and incapabilities at times can occur, especially in time of crisis. There will be a lot of potential mismanagement or accident, and sometimes, not by intention or not by incapability, but by the whole crisis that can morph into a bigger crisis. On the economic side, it was a healthcare crisis, and various countries are facing mismanagements on the economic side because of difficulty and trickiness and changes that COVID has brought about. So for me, it's healthy to see I hope to see real evidences, and if there are real corruptions occur within this government, I hope that minister get the axe. I genuinely hope that. Whether it's going to fall, the government will fall because of one minister getting the axe because of corruption charges or because of the real seriousness of his wrongdoings. If it's real, I hope he gets the axe. But let's see come the months of May and see the real charges.
Okay, so it seems to me like the baseline scenario would still be that General Prayut would most likely still be Prime Minister, right? I mean, this seems like the baseline, because a lot of people are wondering, I think a lot of people are sort of pent up for some change, but all things being equal, I don't see replacement, partly because the rules are that way, right, Kun Jaturon? I mean, to have the same parliament with the new Prime Minister, we have to go back to the 2019 ballots, right? And each party had its candidate for Prime Ministership, so the Democrat Party would have been Kun Apisit still, and the Pheu Thai, I think, had 4, Kun Sudarat, Kun Chatchat, 3, and Kun Chakesem. And then so Kun Chai Thai has Kun Anutin, right? So the only other person that can be conceivably Prime Minister other than General Prayut would have to be Kun Anutin, if it works out that way, right? Otherwise, because the rules are written that way, General Prayut will be Prime Minister in the baseline scenario, in the basic scenario, through the term. Unless, of course, he resigns or he dissolves the lower house, which he has shown no signs of doing that. Now there's even talk as a coalition parties are not doing so well. I mean, the poll numbers, the sentiments. I mean, there's even a talk of military coup again if they can't win the election. So maybe we'll come to you, Kun Jaturon, a little bit more. I think our audience members are interested about, it's all very murky, like confusing, a bit unclear. Election, General Prayut, he seems so spent as a political force, nothing left, but yet he's still Prime Minister indefinitely. So a lot of people are thinking, how can this be? General Prayut keeps being Prime Minister full term, even though he has no political capital left. He's in political deficit.
He's trying to be Prime Minister in the next term, in the next 4 years as well, I think. General Prayut is very crucial to the government or to the people in power, because he of course he was the coup maker and was the one who is in charge of all of the process that designing the constitution, establish all of the pseudo-independent organizations, and he has the most connections around him. So he's very crucial. If without him, we cannot imagine how these people in power can continue being in power, sustain their power. But given the fact that the Constitution was designed in favor of the elite or the coup makers, it was also designed to weaken political parties and party system, and that Palang Pracharat Party is not excluded. The party is weakened. There's some conflict in the party. So the conflict is quite severe, that there's a risk that General Prayut might not be able to stay very long. So there must be some negotiation, some compromise within the coalition government, especially within the three generals and the Palang Pracharat Party. So, of course, there's common interest in sharing the power, sharing the interest from important portfolio, important ministries. But the most important thing is the continuation of power, which needs General Prayut. So, in the middle of negotiations like this, I think General Prayut still has an upper hand, and he can still manage. In a situation where there's a coalition government like this, the other reason that the government will not survive is the role of the coalition parties, especially when the popularity of the government and Prime Minister is declined to a large extent. So we need to see what would be the position of or decision of the coalition parties. Now you can see only the Democrats, Phum Chai Thai. Phum Chai Thai might want to be the core of the government, might want its leader to become prime minister. So this is, but this kind of conflict and game being played by the coalition parties, the prime minister and his colleagues, is not beneficial to the country. The longer General Prayut is in power, is in the position as prime minister, the worse the economic situation of the country will be. So about one more year left, maybe one more year left. If there is no change, if the if the prime minister and his colleagues still has to every day try to survive, there's no use for the country. And so we still, I think Thai people still need to put some pressure on the government. State the demand for a better policy, better government, and in the end, inevitably, we must pressure the prime minister to either step down or dissolve the house.
Yeah, thank you very much, Khun Jatron. Francis, on this note, Thai people, not just young people, Thai people, too passive, indifferent. They seem to go along, very tolerant, not making demands. Young people have. That's the first question to you. And then Francis, in hindsight, looking back over the last 2 years, would the youth-led movement have done anything different? What are some of the lessons learned? And then, younger people, you think that a lot of them will turn out to vote or not? And if they turn out to vote, who would they vote for, generally?
All right, so, well, there were many questions to the fold, but let's get it going first. Thailand, well, Thai people in particular, I don't think they were not really that passive. Well, especially in Bangkok, if I may say so. But if we look into the county side, where most of the people live, there is actually places exist outside of Bangkok too. So the people over there seems to be a little bit indifferent to that, to the problems happening in the capital, to say the least. They care only to the policies that would affect them exclusively. How can I get jobs? What is my pension? And how can I get the local obajors to work with me better? And that's what their vote is about. The national politics is just that, national. And the people down in the provincial side, the countryside, they're just oblivious to it, which is not their fault, of course. Now, when speaking in terms of how my generation, how the young people of my generation do in these political situations that we have here. Now, of course, they're tired of it. They're tired of the BS that is happening around how the parliament is running, how the governing coalition is basically scrambling for power and something like that. And of course, if they get the chance, they would pretty much organize themselves to vote in their local elections, as we can see from the Twitter as of late. If there's any kind of local elections, to say like Obata, like the provincial administration, local administrations, and even in the upcoming Bangkok election, they would pretty much organize in a way that they would go to their local precinct to vote. Now, as for who would vote for, I think the answers to that is obvious. If we're talking in a Bangkok gubernatorial context, it's probably going to be Khun Chat anyway. But generally, the youth votes will go to any party who oozes much of the opposition efforts to the current government or to the current administration, to say the least. And that would be probably in between Pheu Thai Party and the Move Forward Party. These two parties will likely to carry the youth votes in a sense. But then again, as the constitutional amendment as of late, the two ballot system would tend to favor Pheu Thai Party as much. And as much as I hate it, it's kind of the rule of the game. So that we have that going forward for us. But yeah, I think there were a lot of kinks to work out in the long term. But I think as of late, the youth votes were likely to go to both Move Forward and to Pheu Thai. And how the youth movement in 2020 factor into all of this. Now, there's one aspect that I haven't talked about, because we have to admit that after a while, the figures of the movement have seen that there's also another way to help to help alleviate or change the current situation. And that means they have to work with the political parties. The parties like Move Forward, the parties like Pheu Thai Party, they all had some of the members from the movement days that have been organizing protests before and now are working directly with the party. And I also know for the fact that it's because that a lot of my friends who were in the same group as mine, the coalition of Saraya, are now joining the either Move Forward or Pheu Thai Party. So that's where they are now, and they are hoping to change or to look into the political situation and decide whether it will be wise to act again.
So younger people are more politically engaged, in your view, and then they're engaging by becoming more active politically, working with political parties, joining political parties, apart from the overall Thai electorate.
Yeah.
So I think there are two areas for our audience members to maybe understand Thai politics. One is the design and the structure of the constitution,
Yeah.
the way it is set up. It really favors this government.
Yeah.
And it would be very hard to break that grip, the constitutional grip. But after the Senate's term expires after 5 years, after the next election, right, Kun Chataron, then the Senate will not have that prerogative to elect the Prime Minister. Then the game might change a little bit then. But you still have these other agencies that have been set up to kind of affect this outcome, support this government. And I think the other area, maybe the demographics.
Yes.
Which means that it seems like especially younger people, and more of them get to vote every year.
Yes, apparently.
But so the constitutional design structure is one thing, but the younger people, they are committed to reform and change. So maybe it's a matter of time.
It is.
It's maybe 5 years, 10 years, maybe. Then
Probably, yes.
Yeah, you see that?
I can probably see that in the next couple of 5 or 10 years when the demographics of this country is changing. But we also have to factor in that a lot of people are having less children as we go along. It might be possible that a lot of the people who were born in the 2000s, 2010s will be able to reach the voting age as they come, but that is not a sustainable solution in the end, because we all know that people are having less children as the day goes by, and we are coming to a society of which we have to help the elders, and in a sense, we're becoming, and I'm not sure what's the term, but I would call them the elderly society. Yes. Aging society, yes. And we will likely have the kind of situation where Japan is. Japan is now in an aging society. And there is much less talk about political change within the country as they go along. And that is kind of the direction which I'm a little bit worried about too. But within the spans of the next decade alone, I'm probably thinking that we may be able to affect some changes before the prospect of having an aging society kind of comes in. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll just have the last round, but I want to give audience members opportunity to ask questions or make comments. The floor is open. If you want to come up, there's a microphone up here. Just Kun Prin and Kun Chataron, the only alternative electoral scenario, as is for the Democrat Party as well. From the last election, basically you have two camps, more or less, right? The opposition camp, Pheu Thai, and then Move Forward, used to be Future Forward, and then Seri Rum Thai a little bit, and then the government parties, the coalition parties, Democrat Party, coalition member Phum Chai Thai, and then Palang Pracharat. So they formed the government after the last election, even though Palang Pracharat was the second largest winning, not the first largest winning. It seems that would this happen again? So the next election, the scenario could be that Pheu Thai will certainly Move Forward will not be in government unless Move Forward can form a government with Pheu Thai, right? So does that suggest, Kun Chataron, that they have to win big? They have to win big. They have to win by a large margin, and benefiting maybe from the Palang Pracharat fragmentation, defections. Is that an alternative electoral scenario that we can look at? In that case, would the Democrat Party be able to work with would be willing to join a Pheu Thai-led coalition if it happens that way? Jatharon.
The term pro-democracy parties probably will still be used in the upcoming election. Still, the parties will be divided into two sides, like pro-democracy and then the other side. And in order for pro-democracy parties to be able to form a government, they might need to get at least 250 some seats. Of course, if they get like 240, and then other parties are persuaded or induced to join, and then they can form a government with, say, 300 something seats. That is also possible, but I would say pro-democracy parties need at least 250 to guarantee that the other side will not be able to pass any bills. And that means they cannot be a government. Because this is a bit complicated, because after the election, the voting for prime minister will be done in the two houses combined assembly, right? And you need 376 or more from the two houses. And it's impossible for political parties to gain like more than 375, especially pro-democracy parties will not be able to get that many seats. So you need 250 first, because in parliament, in the House of Representatives, you need 250 or more to assure that you pass the bill, the budget bill, for example. And that means if you get more than 250, it's going to be very difficult for the other side to form the government and for that government to last for a long time. The rule of the game in the electoral system has been changed to the two-ballot system. And I still don't quite understand why initially the Palang Pracharat and the government decided to change the system back to the old time, to the two-ballot system, because it's going to be beneficial to the big party, especially Pheu Thai party. But at that time, probably, from what we heard, the people in the government, especially in the Palang Pracharat party, believed that Palang Pracharat party would be the biggest party and would benefit the most from the two-ballot system. But even before, a couple of days before the voting time to pass the draft, there was some conflict in the party, in the Palang Pracharat party. And after that, the conflict became more severe, and the party split, and then now probably, we don't know how many parties there will be that split from the Palang Pracharat party in the upcoming election. So it's more likely that Pheu Thai will benefit the most. But when Pheu Thai benefit from the party list, which is reduced from 150 to 100. So we are talking about like 30 or 40 seats added to the previous number of seats. Why they don't want the one ballot system? Because they were afraid that Move Forward Party will benefit the most. If there was one ballot system, Move Forward Party might gain like something like 100 seats. It's possible for Move Forward Party to gain the 100 seats. So as far as we know, when you talk to those people who were very close to the coup maker or those who used to support the coup, they would say that the first goal is to weaken or destroy the Move Forward Party. And then they believe that Palang Pracharat still benefit more than Pheu Thai. But now the scenario changed. Yes. And we don't know what they're going to think. They are thinking that they might be thinking of dissolve some political parties. That is also another possibility. You don't know which one will be dissolved, either Pheu Thai or Move Forward Party. That's also, you need to take that into account.
As a last resort, very possible as well. If there's no other choice.
The last resort that might be prepared in advance.
Yeah. You know, the last election, the numbers came very close. So between Pheu Thai, Future Forward, and Seri Rom Thai came out to about 230, almost 250. But still, because of the way that the constitution was structured, yeah. But the two key parties, Kun Prin, was the Phum Chai Thai and the Democrat Party. Because once the Phum Chai Thai and Democrat Party joined the coalition government under General Prayut, that was it. So we had that government, and the opposition was denied. Do you see, in your view, the Democrat Party also has some breakaway factions a little bit, right? So maybe the numbers may be a little bit lower next election, and do you see being able to join the Democrat Party would call itself certainly a pro-democracy party, right? So it could also join that side, this side.
I certainly hope we are the, as Kun Chatral mentioned, pro and democracy group party, as you all know. I mean, I'm sure Democrat Party is as pro-democracy as anyone in a sense, both in terms of walking the talk and having a very fiercely contested leadership election at the last time round, which 4 potential leaders, candidates were competing very truly fiercely, and the winner, Kun Jurin, became a leader. And sometimes, because of that fiercely contested and the nature of the democratic institution within the Democrat Party functions daily basis throughout 75, 76-year history. For me, that's pro-democracy in walking the talk and doing it internally within our party. Of course, there will be questions asked at the next election how pro-democratic we are, that we support a man who did the coup. And I think this is a question that will need to be answered directly, because in the election last time, I think you saw both Kun Jurin, both Kun Apisit voice direct unhappiness at this constitution, voice direct unhappiness at how the we use the word whipperit, but I don't know how English would be a very perverse constitutional democracy that we are seeing. And in Parliament, if you look at the speeches and the way that the Democrat MPs have been voicing, we maintain this line, meaning that we disagree with having 250 senators to elect the Prime Minister. And this remains the same stance. So I think it's still perverse in that sense. And we will still fight the campaign saying that we want to change the power of the Senate to elect the Prime Minister. However, which sides, you would take, it's so hard because the Democrat Party being democratic. This time around, we had the raising up of hands. We had to. It's not one man who can decide. Kun Jurin alone cannot say we can join the government, or the Secretary General, Kun Chalerm Chai Siyon, can just say let's join the government and the party will join. It doesn't happen that way. And when the votes come, then that's when the real decision will be made. Anything before that, you can guess, you can make a guesstimate, you can try to predict the course, but at times it's because the nature of this mechanism of voting from the executive board of the Democrat Party of how to join or not join, elect who is the minister or not the minister, elect this decisions. It sometimes can be difficult for me to just say, yes, we will join this coalition, we will not join that coalition. I think it will be interesting that next election, for me, will be different to the last election. So when you say that the Democrat Party may get less votes than the last election, so I hope not, but we will see. Last election was exceptional in many ways. There were many exceptional circumstances that happened in the last election, including the last week campaigning, the tone that came out, and everything. So again, the election, general election when it comes, whether this year or next year, I'm sure will be very different. And I think judging by the results of the by-elections in the South, it's encouraging to see that we can still keep the maintaining the seats that we are strongholds. And I think with some seats that potentially in the domestic polls that we're doing may be coming back to Democrat Party in the South. And in Bangkok, where I think you will see there are many member parliaments and ex-member parliaments of Bangkok who were working tirelessly very hard in the last election. I can't give you names because they work very hard, like Kun Onanong Kanchana Chusak Pitui in the Pathum Wan district. There was Kun Jermat, in the Pomprap Paranakon district. Kun Apimongkon and Kun Apimuk Chantawanit now, who works hard in those districts. That it was almost shock to them that they worked tirelessly, and of course they lost the election in a big way, not just losing the election, but they were wiped out, came fourth or came third, not even first or second. So with the two kind of ballots, one voting purely for the party, one purely for the constituents, MPs, I think their tireless works or their kind of consistency that they have worked hard in that district can be rewarded directly, or can be transformed into votes directly for their hard works. So for me, at least, I hope Bangkok will not be zero like last time. And I hope at least in the southern part, the stronghold can come back as some shape or forms, and that the works of Kun Jurin and Kun Chalermchai, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Commerce, with exports recovering very strongly, and some good works in the SME and stuff. I hope that would also be rewarded in some shape or forms. But it's so hard to gauge a general election result, because last election result, I think many pundits also got it wrong. Same as Bangkok governor election. And I will not be surprised the election coming up, whether it's this year or next year, that there will be new political parties. So it's so hard to guess who will seize these two kind of tickets.
And in a sense, Kun Prin, it's also actually what I worry about is a new center-right party like Pak Kla, or like the Pak Kla party or something like that, because it was led by the former Democrat, right, Kun Gon. Yeah, so I was worried that in Bangkok you might get a little bit hard time, and it might be even spoiler effect going on. So do you worry about the Kla party as of late? Do you worry about them?
They come from the same base, right?
They're from the same base, but let me tell you this, it's not easy. And I know Kun Gon will probably share the same thought if he was to get this stage here. It's not easy to set up new political parties. And I think Pak Kla has seen 3 elections already, 3 by-elections results. And it's not easy on them, especially the ones in Bangkok recently, where actually, funny enough, the Democrat Party was helping them in the campaign a little bit, because Kun Atawit was with his stronghold in Jatuchak. So there were some of the voters who voted Democrat in that Jatuchak district went to vote for Pak Kla. It will be interesting at the real general election how that vote will be counted once it come out. But yes, there will be a few parties, I'm sure, from the governments at the moment, the coalitions that will be shared, and there will be a few votes who will be shared from the other side. So. But I tell you, the smaller parties are not easy. I think it'll be not easy for them. I'll be. Yeah.
Microphone, please, if you want to.
It's just that, like the last election, the recent election in Jatuchak, right? I think Kla party can kind of come up third, or the third place in, and I think it's kind of like a little bit concerning for the Democrats that it might be hard for the general elections to come. But I love your positivity. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Francis. I'm going to bring this to a close. I think Kun Prin said it well. Thai politics is very difficult to gauge. You gauge Thai politics, you predict it at your peril. No one truly knows. I think a lot of unanswered questions, but I think we have not found answers, but maybe a little bit some clear direction in a way, there will be some election. There will be a Bangkok governor election, and there will be a general election by next year around this time. By March next year, they have to call one. Could be sooner. So I think to me, the bottom line will be whether we'll see more change than continuity or more continuity than change. And the odds are pretty much, I think, leaning towards maybe more continuity than change because the rules have been kind of stuck that way for the foreseeable. So please join me in thanking our speakers, Kun Francis Pun Kanun, Pao Tho, Kun Jataron Chai Sang, Kun Prin Panichapak. Stay tuned for future events now that we can have in-person events again. And thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you.